So we're going to do some recording. I think this is on. Okay, I'm going to do a little explanation of motivation. I've talked about this a little bit in the one afternoon section. I didn't really hit it in the morning section, so we're just going to hit this again. One of the topics that was suggested and requested and actually voted pretty highly is one about motivation. So I'm going to talk about some of my concepts on motivation and how it functions. It's a really interesting topic and one that is probably very challenging. Again, if you've looked at the constructive criticism one, I talked a little bit about agency there. I think, again, that's a very key concept to study and understand. What are the boundaries of agency? How far does it go? How much can we implement or influence? Sorry, not implement. How far can we influence the motivation and the agency of another? That's essentially what motivation has to do with. Well, there's a lot of really great ideas around motivation. I'm going to blend a couple of different ideas. One comes from my mission president, actually. It's a very related concept that I found very relevant here. He used to draw up, oh, that's not really a good pen. He used to draw up the 3 degrees of glory when we would talk about the plan of salvation. He would draw it up like this. You know, we usually see those 3 degrees of glory at the tail end of the plan of salvation with these different areas: celestial kingdom, terrestrial kingdom, telestial kingdom, and outer darkness. He would draw this up and then say, we draw this wrong. And he would redraw it more like this, with the celestial kingdom being very large. I don't know if you can see this on the video or not. The terrestrial kingdom is kind of small, and the telestial kingdom is like microscopic, and outer darkness you can't even really see it on there. And he would ask the question, I don't know if this is, he would ask the question, do we believe that God is bad at what he does? And I thought that was a very, very insightful statement, very insightful question. Now, I don't know when you draw this up if this means that this is the population or the number of people in each kingdom, or whether this just means the influence of those or the impact of those in these kingdoms. I'll just leave that up to you to interpret how you want, but I've always felt that that was a very pertinent, very relevant question that was very insightful. Now, relating this to motivation, you see that there's breakpoints here. You know, there's a breakpoint that we need to cross at each of these stages or levels. Now, this is not doctrine. This isn't church doctrine. I really mean to take just two models and compare them with each other. One of these models that I found very interesting was one that looks at both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And I found that extrinsic motivation tends to work well here, and intrinsic motivation tends to work well here. Why? Well, this is where, again, my mission president described these this way. He says, look back in section 76. What you find is the description of those in the telestial kingdom are basically described as selfish. That's pretty much the word that describes what drives or motivates them. It's those who lie, cheat, steal, who love and make a lie, sorcerers, whoremongers. Really, at the root of the description of the people in this kingdom, it has to do with selfishness. That they're only driven by their own selfishness. And that's what motivates them. That's what quickens them or gives them life. Now, terrestrial kingdom, what gives these people life? This one isn't as clear. My mission president said it this way. He said, this is the kingdom of law and order. And that makes sense to an extent. To me, as I experience life, I kind of see people dropping themselves into these buckets and essentially judging themselves or putting themselves in a kingdom. They're putting themselves in a state of being wherever they feel most comfortable. Here, those that establish law and order, their goal or their role is to establish, hey, this is how I do things, this is how you do things. Oftentimes it's you do your thing and I'll do mine, and I don't ever want to talk to you otherwise, but hey, at least we can operate according to law and order. And that's one level or one layer. That's one set of motivation, or one level of what motivates or quickens people. And then the top level, the celestial kingdom, my mission president called it the kingdom of sacrifice and obedience. Okay? I think you could also recraft that as just the kingdom of selflessness, where the genuine hope and the genuine aim and what quickens or what motivates or what causes us or spurs us on to action, those in the celestial kingdom, it's a feeling of selflessness, of sacrifice and obedience. It's I'm going to do these things to benefit other people, not myself. I've had times in my life where I've been in each of these different zones, and there's different parts of my life that I function better in each of these levels or layers than others. But I find if there's any one thing or any area that I want to change or make some habit change or really change my nature, these are the tools that often help. These are the style or the classification of tools that help me move from one stage into the next. If I'm in a mode where I'm selfish and I'm lazy or I'm just not doing anything, as long as I'm not in a state of open rebellion, which is, I think that's what outer darkness is this rebellion stage, then I'm more likely to be here. If I'm in the open rebellion stage, I think what needs to happen here, the motivator here, but the change agent here is just love. I think love and patience. And those are ingredients that help in these other areas as well, but these other motivators can help. So extrinsic motivators are pretty much anything that's punishment or reward oriented. If I create I'll give you a cookie if you do this for me, or if I do this for you, you can do that for me. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Those are extrinsic type motivators. And if I'm absorbed in this selfishness mode, or if I have some particular habit, maybe if it's just my time management, maybe I'm constantly or chronically late at work. Mostly that's because I think more about myself than I do anyone else, and I'm thinking about myself or my natural man that just doesn't want to do things and on somebody else's schedule. Or I'm thinking about how I just don't want to do this at all, and I don't have the motivation to do what somebody else is asking me to do. I'm in this zone. What's going to help me get out of that? Punishment reward system should work. If I come, say if I'm the employee that's late, and my boss comes to me and says, "Hey, what is it that you really want? Can we give you a bonus? Can I give you time off? Can I rearrange your work assignments so you're working with other people that you like better? So can I switch the clients or the companies that you're working with? Can I give you a different job role or job function somehow?" Those are all extrinsic punishment reward oriented. You're trying to create something that this person sees as a reward, that they're willing to do something to make a change for. That'll create law and order. This is usually a short-term kind of thing. Sometimes it can be long-term, longer term, but I don't see it as eternal most of the time. Maybe it might be, but typically it's more temporal, short-term, something that helps you cross that barrier of being more worried about yourself than you are others. I can do the punishment system perspective. I can, if I'm the bad employee, I can go to my boss. My boss can come to me and say, "Hey, you're late again. I'm going to verbally abuse you in your office. I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to tell you that you're worthless. And I'm going to tell you we're going to go through this again. Until you get this fixed, I'm going to go through this approach, and that's your punishment." Or I can say, "Listen, you do this again, you're fired." Or you do this again, and I'm taking it out of your pay. I can take that punishment perspective as an extrinsic motivator to hopefully change behavior. Again, I see punishment as usually even less strong than reward. Probably more short-term than reward. But either one of those can help as extrinsic motivators move us from one stage into another. If you're working with a teammate, you just can't stand how they do certain things, have a conversation with them, set up some kind of a reward system. Think of what they want most, think of what's going to be a benefit to them, think of what they would find desirable, and then work out basically a social contract or a physical contract where you sign it and say, "If you do this, I will do that," and away you go. You can move along. Or create some kind of a point system or a board tracker to see, hey, if I check this many boxes, I get this many cookies. however you want to do that, but that's essentially the pattern, is it's extrinsic and you're moving people from a selfish mode into a mode of law and order. Now if you want to move people up to this more higher level, a higher level of performance where they're intrinsically driven, where they're proactive, where they're wanting to serve and help other people, you can't get there through extrinsic motivators. The individual person, again, this comes back to the boundaries of agency. This is a boundary in agency. I can't get people to be selfless because I force them into it. I can't get people to be charitable, or I can't get them to sacrifice and take one for the team. They're in control of that. I cannot control that. I cannot demand it. I cannot require it. I cannot create powerful enough motivators for that to become a sustainable thing. I can influence in the short term, but really all you're ending up with is law and order. For a short-term duration, you find some kind of contract that you get by and you make do with. If I want this to become something that changes someone's nature or changes who they are, it's got to be a much more powerful experience and a much more powerful tool. As intrinsic motivators, there's a researcher named McClelland that came up with 3 intrinsic motivators. He was a psychologist that studied this for years. He came up with 3. They were autonomy or agency. That means that I'm giving someone the complete control over being in charge of a situation. Maybe I put them in charge, maybe I identify them as the leader, or maybe I just give them a stewardship over their area and make it a true stewardship. I give them power, decision-making capability. I give them the opportunity to make all the resource, to obtain all the resources they need. I give whatever I can to support, sustain, and encourage them to take full autonomy and stewardship over what they do. That can be a powerful intrinsic motivator. It can motivate people to work at a higher level and to accomplish a greater good and to achieve a greater good. The next one is affiliation. If I line things up where you're going to start working with people that you like, or start creating experiences where you build some very powerful relationships, this is an intrinsic motivator. It'll help people get into this zone of sacrifice and obedience and selflessness. But again, they choose it. As a manager, if I'm looking downward at my subordinates and thinking, okay, if I give them this great ability to build relationships, then I'm so magnanimous, and of course they'll do this, and this will all work out perfectly. It won't. There will be some bugs in it. You give them the opportunity, but they're the ones that have to be taking on the intrinsic motivation. It has to come from within them. It can't come from outside of them, or it's extrinsic. If it's intrinsic and truly coming from inside of them, that's when it has the power. You can do your best to try and inspire that, to motivate it, to encourage it, to make it available, to provide the opportunities or the environment, but really, it's got to come from within. The last one here is achievement. And this is achievement in terms of how well someone, how a person identifies or defines achievement is up to them. If they see being able to skateboard down a rail, a 50-foot rail as an achievement, then that's a genuine achievement to them. Myself, I don't see the point of that. It'd probably hurt myself anyway, so I probably wouldn't consider that much of an achievement. If I could do it, then yeah, that would be an achievement, but I probably can't do it. It's got to be an achievement that is desirable and driven and defined from within. Oftentimes that can be inspired through showing someone some of the possibilities of what can be done and what others have done. Oftentimes that inspires other people to build for themselves their own motivators and their own definitions of what they want to be able to achieve. As that happens, these are the intrinsic motivators that McClelland identifies. Essentially, they should, and they often do, start to tie into a selflessness and a sense of sacrifice and obedience. They may not always. They may help target and maintain law and order. But as you continue to work with these motivators and build what's inside of people, you'll find that over time they tend to lift themselves. tend to find, I think it's kind of through the affiliation one, that links in, and the affiliation is what binds it, all these pieces, that starts to bind that together into a selfless kind of pattern. So that's probably enough on motivation. Those are some ideas on how to help work with people. Usually I get this question framed as, how do I motivate others? I think that's slightly the wrong question. Yes, you can motivate others. Really all you can do is inspire others, or learn to relate to others, or desire to help build what's inside of others. But that's different than motivating others. Motivation is really within their sphere of control, and that's within the bounds of agency that our Father in heaven has set. I don't know if He set strict rules that protect that from being broken, or whether that's just how intelligence functions fundamentally. That's a pretty deep question. I don't think I could answer that one right off the top of my head. But this gives tools, or gives us some ideas or some frameworks around how motivation occurs and how we can work with it. Understanding extrinsic versus intrinsic, those are key terms to go study and learn more about. I found that there are 100,000 different variations of those. But I like how McClellan boils them down to 3 major elements, and I think he's right. I haven't been able to find much that's beyond that, unless I get into the world of spiritual gifts and spiritual interaction. There's a little bit that can play into intrinsic motivation, but from a secular perspective, I think he's nailed it. As far as how you can interact with people on a professional level, especially if you don't want to bring up gospel-related subjects, those are your tools. That's what you have to work with. Now, extrinsic motivators, there's a million of those, and you can come up with as many as you can possibly imagine, search out, but they all fall into that basic bucket, is that it's something outside of the individual that's urging, inspiring, or threatening them, manipulating them in some way to act in some other fashion. They're not as powerful, but that's what they are. If you want something more powerful and timely and eternal, deal with intrinsic motivators, and that's going to change not what people do. This one, extrinsic motivators are aimed at what people do. Intrinsic motivators are aimed at helping change or influence what people are and what they become. So there's a video there on some motivational ideas. I hope that helps.